Peace, family. It's your brother, Marc Lamont Hill. For the last day, the internet has been on fire talking about Bishop T.D. Jakes. For those that don't know, Bishop T.D. Jakes is one of America's most treasured theologians. He is the bishop and the head of Potter's House Church in Texas, and he is one of the most important spiritual and theological voices in the country. He's somebody who I consider to be a brilliant man, a brilliant preacher, and an inspirational figure. Well, for the last 24 hours, he has been caught up in a whole lot of scandal and spectacle connected to Diddy, connected to Cassie, connected to a whole bunch of gossip and rumor and innuendo that to this date has not been proven yet. So I'm not going to get into the mess and the spectacle and the gossip of it. I'm going to vibrate a little bit higher than that. But I did want to use this as an opportunity to talk about T.D. Jakes and his position on the Black church and sexuality. A few years ago, actually almost 10 years ago, I did an interview with Bishop T.D. Jakes where the question of sexuality and the Black church came up. And here's what he said.
I think it's going to be diverse from church to church. Every church has a different opinion on the issue, and every gay person is different. And I think that to speak the church, the Black church or white church or any kind of church you want to call it, are all the same is totally not true. And all gay people are not the same. The types of relationships that are afforded are based on the types of people in each individual case. Yeah. And LGBTs of types and sorts have to find a household of worship that reflects what your views are and what you believe like anybody else. And the church should have the right to have its own convictions and values. If you don't like those convictions and values, you totally disagree with it, don't try to change my house, move into your own and establish that sort of thing and find somebody who gets what you get about faith. And trust me, I've talked to enough LGBT, they are not all the same.
Oh, for sure. Anyone and all Christians are the same.
No.
He gave a very interesting and important answer there, but I felt like that answer wasn't exactly answering the question about the church. It was more focused on American society. So I pushed him a little bit. First of all, has your thinking evolved on this?
Evolved and evolving. Mm-hmm. Evolved and evolving.
Where were you and where are you?
I think that where I am is to better understand, the church bought into the myth that this was a Christian nation. And once you get past that, which a lot of people are going to criticize me because they're still going to think it's a Christian nation, which is a whole different show. Mm-hmm. But once you begin to understand that democracy and that a republic actually is designed to be an overarching system to protect our unique nuances, then we no longer look for public policy to reflect biblical ethics. If we can divide, or what you would call separation of church and state, then we can dwell together more effectively. Because atheists, agnostics, Jews, all types of people, Muslims pay into the government then cannot reflect one particular view over another just because we are the dominant group of religious people in the country, because those numbers are changing every day. We need a neutralized government that protects our right to disagree with one another and agree with one another.
Mm-hmm. From there, I wanted to go even deeper into the conversation by asking him about his own personal conviction and his own personal stance on this vis-a-vis the church.
Right.
Inside the church, has your thinking biblically, scripturally, hermeneutically shifted at all? And the reason I ask that is because I talk to a lot of ministers now, and there was that big conference out in South Africa in the last couple of weeks where people from all over the world were there, and this is one of the issues that came up along with race and other things. And one of the questions was, is there a way to approach Christian tradition, Christian scripture, in light of a new understanding of LGBT? For example, 18th century, there might have been a particular understanding of what slavery meant in relation to Paul, in relation to the New Testament, et cetera. That has shifted to the point that it is socially accepted that irrespective of what text says literally, we don't support slavery as a body, right? And even though it varies church, most churches don't support slavery. Right. Might be a few out there that do. We don't get invited to those. But similarly, there's room for that same kind of shift.
I think that shift has to go on behind the closed doors of the church, because I think in the mainstream America, anybody who doesn't agree with you, we have a derogatory name to call you. And I think it oversimplifies the complexity of text. The fact that you have fidelity to the scriptures as you have been taught does not mean that you're necessarily homophobic or any other kind of phobia, but yet in mainstream America, anybody who doesn't line up with a particular worldview, we give them a name to ostracize them, much like we were given names to ostracize us. this name calling does not depict the struggle that many people have theologically. I think the argument has to be theological and not sociological. The fact that the world has turned that way doesn't mean that the word has changed that way. The argument for clergy, fundamental clergy, has to be a theological argument. It cannot be a sociological one.
Bishop Jakes even added this caveat at the end about how difficult this is and how difficult this topic is, not just for Black folk and for church folk now, but throughout history.
Well, it's a complex issue. It's a real complex issue, and it was in the Bible days. Sexuality versus spirituality. Paul spends a lot of time wrestling back and forth, trying to understand, should a woman wear her head covered? Should you cut your hair? I mean, they grappled back then, and we're grappling now because we are humans, and we are flawed, and we are not God. Yeah. Once you understand you're not God, you leave yourself an out clause to grow.
So this is an important place to begin. Bishop Jakes isn't just an individual preacher, although he is an individual preacher. He represents the stance and the politics and the sexuality politics of the Black church in America in a lot of ways. He is a mainstream religious thinker. And what I got from my conversation with Bishop Jakes was that the church is changing its stance, that the church is evolving, but that there has to be space for a nuanced conversation that is rooted in scripture and doesn't just succumb to the politics of the moment. Now, I wanted to push back on him in a lot of areas, but we ran out of time. And to be clear, this conversation that I had with Bishop Jakes wasn't supposed to happen. We didn't plan this. We didn't schedule this. I didn't ambush him. This conversation emerged from a caller or somebody who wrote in on the online HuffPost platform asking him to answer this question. So I wasn't expecting any more than he did. But in the aftermath, this is the interesting part. In the aftermath of our conversation, Bishop Jakes got attacked. The Christian newspapers, the online press, the right-wingers, the anti-LGBTQ movements, they were on Bishop Jakes for having a fairly humane and open and developing conversation, even if I still think he wasn't in the right place. And he didn't think I was in the right place. I'm sure if we were to talk long enough, we don't have to agree. Brothers don't have to agree. But it was important for us to have that kind of conversation. And people weren't having it. And it got so intense that Bishop Jakes actually had to issue a public statement saying that he was not evolving on the LGBTQ stance. Here's exactly what he said. My comment on HuffPo TV drifted into issues of the Supreme Court ruling and changing the world through public policy versus personal witness. Further, I have come to respect that I can't force my beliefs on others by controlling public policy for taxpayers and other U.S. citizens. Jesus never sought to change the world through public policy, but rather through personal transformation. All people didn't embrace him either. That's what I said and what I meant, nothing more and nothing less. Just because a so-called Christian publication chooses to misconstrue my words using lazy journalistic tactics to further their own agenda and draw attention to their site does not make their statements an accurate depiction of what I said or meant. He's not talking about HuffPost or me here. He's talking about, I believe, I don't want to say the name of the publication because I don't want to get it wrong, but he was talking about a publication that made it seem as if he was taking a slightly different position than what he said. Here's the interesting part, though. He said, do not take everything you read online or hear repeated as truth. When asked about the Black church and its role in ministering to gay people, I briefly mentioned, we were running out of time, the word evolved and evolving regarding my approach over the 39 years of my ministry to gay people who choose to come to our services. I simply meant that my method is evolving, not my message. I was shocked to read that this was manipulated in a subsequent article to say I endorsed same-sex marriage. My position on the subject has been steadfast and rooted in scripture. For the record, I do not endorse same-sex marriage, but I respect the rights that this country affords those that disagree with me. So you can judge for yourself from our conversation, from our interview, and from his subsequent words where Bishop Jakes stands on this issue. He's also written and spoken about this extensively. But I do think it's important to know what his politics are on this issue. It's important to know where he stands, not because of the recent drama or the recent strife, but because he is a towering figure in our community, someone who has earned the benefit of the doubt with regard to rumors. We should wait for evidence. We should wait for substantiated claims. We should wait for a real journalistic endeavor before we say anything about what's true or what's not. Let's get some truth out there. But also because it's a window into the Black church's mind. It's a window into the Black church's sensibilities. Now, there's no single Black church. There's lots of Black churches. There's lots of Black politics. There's lots of Black perspectives. There's lots of Black culture that circulate in and out of the doors of various churches. So I don't want to reduce the Black church to one person or one perspective, but this is a dominant one from a dominant figure. And so we want to pay attention to it. Let me know what you think. Also, hit the subscribe button if you want more content like this. Hit the like button if you agree with me. And also hit that join button if you're so inclined so you can become part of the MLH official channel.